What's your favorite wine and food pairing?
It depends on what you're doing. So my favorite one for pizza, for example, it's dolcetto. For barbaresco, that could be risotto mushrooms or the white truffle. Absolutely. What my grandmother always told us, it's you have to do what you like. There is a good pairing, of course, but it's mostly okay. If you want to drink dolcetto with white truffle, why not? If you like
Right?
it and if you
You like
feel
it?
that you want to have a dolcetto with white truffle, you have to do it. Or if you want to have oysters with barbaresco, go for it. If you feel that it's your pairing, do it.
Welcome to this special Clubhouse session of the Italian Wine Podcast. Listen in as members of the Italian wine community engage in fascinating conversations about contemporary wine topics. If you enjoyed the show, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com and remember to subscribe and rate the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your pods.
Hello and welcome to Clubhouse, the Ambassador's Corner. My name is Carla Ravagnolo and today I'm pleased to welcome Italian Wine Ambassador Luis Reyneri and his guest Luisa Rocca from Bruno Rocca Estate. Welcome everybody!
Ciao, ciao tutti.
Ciao a tutti.
For those who may not know him yet, Luis is a Cuban-born Advanced Sommelier and Certified Wine Specialist with over 3 decades of wine and hospitality experience. Now owner of the Grove Cucina Wine in Hobe Sound, Florida, his extensive background includes experiences as lead sommelier at Le Cirque restaurant in Las Vegas, vice president of sales of Domaine Serene in Serene Winery, and sales director of the Latin Americas for Kendall Jackson, among many others. So, Luis, how's it going? Long time no see. Who did you bring with us here today?
Well, thank you for having me back again. I love doing the podcast and sharing all this great information about Italian wines with our audience. And I can say that I just returned from the Barolo and Barbaresco Academy, which was fantastic in Alba. Thank you, everyone, for hosting that. The Consortio Sergio and Sandro Minello for the wonderful classes and the professors. And then the 2 days at Grande Langhe. So I just finally, after almost 5 days back home in the States, recovered after jet lag and anxious to go back. And so, of course, I'm a fan of everything from Piemonte and Nebbiolo and the Langhe. Is why I went to the academy. And then I'm very lucky to say that on March 4th, Luisa will be coming to the US and she will be hosting a tasting at my restaurant. And so I'm anxious to learn more about her, not only locally, but then, of course, here globally with everyone. So and it's great because it's the Luisa show. It's very unique.
Why did you decide to invite Luisa here with us today?
Well, her family has a rich history of being in Barolo and Barbaresco, and so I really want folks to get a better understanding of someone who grew up in this tradition and now is evolving into maybe a modern style of winemaking in this part of Italy. And I think she has a rich story and several generations that we'll get into some more questions here in just a moment, but also to edify the audience on overview on MGA, soil, the story of Bruno Rocca, and hopefully getting a better understanding of this part of Piemonte.
How did you discover about her wines?
Well, the local wholesaler here had tasted me these wines back in the spring, and so I instantly fell in love with them from just the style, the flavor, I'm sure the way they'll age, and great food wines, of course. And so I've been a fan since I tasted them about 6 months ago with my sales representative here in Florida.
And finally, what are the learning objectives that we should expect from this interview?
Sure. So, 4 key takeaways today, the objectives, talking about the classic traditional method of making wine in the Langhe and some of the modern styles that are evolving. Two, the use of oak, and there's a lot of different applications, I think, now from what I've seen lately. Three, perhaps an overview on the MGA system, because my experience last week in Alba was that still some folks don't know what the MGA system is or is about and why it's important and how maybe that affects even labels. And then the variety of soils in the Langhe. One of the beautiful things we got to do at the end of the course in the Barbaresco Barolo Academy is take a tour in a bus and go throughout Roero, Barolo, Barbaresco, and just really see It was a picture perfect day with the snow covered mountains, alpines. It was just the Alps. It was just amazing. And so it was very clear to see the difference of the geology and geography, how it changed and the exposures. And so maybe Luisa, having grown up there, can tell us a little bit about the difference of these, what they call the white soils versus the brown soils. And so what makes her vineyard so special. Okay, thank you so much. Luisa, ciao.
Ciao, Luis.
Come va? Tutto bene?
Bene. How are
Eh,
you?
sono bene, bene, bene,
Yeah.
bene, benissimo.
Can't
So,
wait to be back in Miami,
yes, well,
in Florida.
I grew up in Miami, but I live
Yeah.
about 2 hours north. So when you come with Cynthia, we're gonna have a nice tasting, and you eat some of our delicious Italian cuisine and drink a lot of your good wine. So our club members and our guests are very excited to have you. So I was hoping that today it's
Yeah.
more really about me just asking some questions, and then you can tell the family story about the Rocca family because I think it's wonderful, exciting. The family started as farmers in 1834, if that's correct, growing a variety of agriculture. So how and when did your family choose to become winemakers, and what kind of are some milestones in 1958 and 78? Can you share that background with the audience?
Yes, of course. So that's true. Our family, it's born in Barbaresco and it's part of Barbaresco since many, many years. So the 1834 is the date of the oldest notary papers that we got, which recognize us as a Rocca family born and lived in Barbaresco and involved in the agriculture side. That is the oldest paper we got simply because before the 1800s, the notary paper were kept into the church archives. And so we just got to the municipality one. And so that's how old we could get. So it could be even before that we are part of Barbaresco municipality. I consider myself a Barbaresco DOCG girl, so definitely a country girl. Back then, Barbaresco farming was pretty much polyedric. So the people that were growing was farmers. So they were growing grapes, but also other things, the vegetables, the fruits, maybe farming cows and animals and so on. This is our region. So we are part of Barbaresco since very long time. So also my grandfather was a grower, was a grape grower, and he used to live in the center of Barbaresco. One of his dream it was to have a house next to the vineyards because when you live in the center of Barbaresco, can I imagine the vineyards sometimes could be pretty much far away. And so he was owning a plot in Montefico, which is IMGA, and another plot in Ronchi. So every day he has to walk back and forth to go and work his land. So one of his dreams for the older age, it was to find a house next to the vineyard to be more easy to go to work. But for him, it was always important to find and to invest only in the great soil, in the great terroir, in the great vineyard. Because as an old man, his idea, his philosophy was you have to pick always a good vineyard because every day you have to get up, you have to go there, you have to work hard. But if you have a great vineyard, at the end of the year, the chance to have a great grapes are higher than if you grow in a not a good vineyard. You still have to get up, you still have to go there, and you still have to work hard. So since the beginning, the philosophy of investing in the great soil, it was absolutely a must. And so at the end of the 50s, he found this house in the Rabaya. And Rabaya back then it was already considered a great place where to grow Nebbiolo grapes. And was due to Domizio Cavazza, the father of Barbaresco, which made this famous list of the place where the Nebbiolo was growing particularly well. So that's why he decided to do the very important change of life to go out from the center of Barbaresco and move in the Rabaya area. So for the people that doesn't know, Rabaya, it's 1 kilometer far from the center of Barbaresco. And in the 50s, it was like go and move in a no man's land. So when they moved to Rabaya, my father remembered that they stayed 2 months without the electricity because they had to connect the center of the town to the countryside to bring the electricity. So that's why it was a very courageous move by my grandfather to move with the family such far away from the center. but he was so connected to the importance of the perfect soil. And so my father as well. So looking at my grandfather putting all this passion on growing grapes, he immediately fell in love with the agriculture. But we are talking about years that Barolo and Barbaresco were not so famous yet, especially Barbaresco. And Barolo was already moving few steps on winemaking and wine promoting, while Barbaresco was still very, very far behind. And so he was not allowed to basically make wines or to work in the lands. He was obliged by my grandfather and my grandmother to study and to pick a real job. That's what they say. Because to be a farmer back then, it meant that you were like a donkey, like a redneck. And so he picked up the ragioneria, so accounting. He worked for Ferrero industry for a very long time. That was very helpful because he was earning a lot of money from the Ferrero industry, doing a very important job that were very important in the next step to start and build what was history. But he has to wait for my grandfather to pass away in the 78 to make the big step and make wines. So in 1978, he decided that he wanted to be a winemaker. So the first year were like experimental, of course. The first bottles that we have labels are dating 1982. And back then he made 815 bottles of Barbaresco Rabaya 1982 because still he was selling the grapes and he was part of the Produttore del Barbaresco because our history is also to sell the grapes to Produttore del Barbaresco. So this is how we begin.
Excuse me, Luisa. So 1978 was your first vintage your dad made. Is that correct?
No, that's the year where
First
he
harvest.
started to. His dream it was to become a winemaker, but of course he has no knowledge about how to transform the grapes into wines. He was very good and very well aware about how to grow great grapes, but nothing about how to transform it, how
Make
to
wine.
make wines. And so he did some experimental here. And the first officially bottles were coming out from the vintage 82, 1982.
Okay, perfect. 82. That was a good year.
Yeah.
That's a good year to start. And so, at what age did you know that you wanted to become a winemaker? And what was your first vintage? And your brother makes wine with you, is that correct?
Yes, we are rock and rolling together. And since the beginning, we were immediately split in what it is our job in the company. Because my brother always been so in love with the agricultural side and with the winemaking side. So I was following my dad in the vineyard, in the cellar. I remember my brother on the tractor when he was 13 years old and trying to going with daddy and doing things. I was following them when I could, but my favorite was to stay with my grandmother and my mom in the cellar, putting the labels on the bottle, preparing the boxes, welcoming customers, help them to lead in tasting. And I was already a chatterbox, and so we were immediately spread as our nature is. So I'm not the winemaker. So it's my brother, the winemaker at the winery. And there is not a proper here that we started because I like to call it like a gentle slavery. We always been part of the family and by part of the industry, I mean, on the winemaking. But we started to take some responsibility. I started in 2005. My brother started in 2008 because it was after the school because of course we had to study, but I already started in the sales office managing stuff while my brother was trying to make the first wines in the years.
Excellent. And I'm sure there's some fun working with your brother, yes?
Yes, yes, we get along very much together and with daddy as well. And
Eh,
so, still today is the three of us, and it's a very good triangle because it's the new generation with the wise history and everything my father gives to us still today. And we are very, very lucky because my father was absolutely generous with us on our position and sharing what this was his kids.
yeah. And so that's a great segue to my next question. And especially since you say you're a Barbaresco DOCG gal, you grew up around everything from when it was established. And what have you seen philosophically change? And what's the style of Bruno Rocca? in terms of your brother who just graduated enology school. And so those of us who've studied, particularly Langhe, the modern versus the traditional. What's going on locally? What can you educate us, tell us about your winemaking style now? So the first things that we have to consider is that back then, when Daddy started, so in the 80s, it was the boom of the region. So it's where most of the winemakers that are super known and that make still great wines today, it was the boom. Then before there was already Gaia, Ceretto, Pio Cesare, and a huge list of great winemakers, Ratti, and so on. The boom of the winemaking was started in the 80s, in the 90s. And back then, we have to think people that started like my father, which is probably the history of, I would say, like 90% of the winemakers. They started investing even the underwear because in that years people were escaping from this region, going to Torino to work for Fiat or start to work for Ferrero industry. So they were going on the industrial side. The people who remain and who believe in the project, they really made the revolution of the year. So what I like to think that our generation, so me, my brother, and all our colleagues, we are doing and we did the evolution of the revolution. So back then, Daddy was the only one in charge of Excuse me, I like that.
pruning.
The evolution of the revolution. I like that.
Yes, exactly. Which is a big responsibility. Daddy back then he was the only one in charge of taking care of the family. So two kids, one wife, one grandmother, house, and then he was in charge of all the vineyards job. And vineyards job are pretty much quite daily, especially in some season of the year. So from the pruning, everything in the vineyard plus everything is the seller, plus wine fairs or selling wines, plus doing all the invoices, all the documents, all the papers that needs required to like to sell wines. And so he was the only one doing all everything. And so as you can imagine, he was doing its best. And so today, the big difference is that we are three and we are co working, and everybody has his own responsibility. And so we can definitely be more focused on what is important. So there is my brother and my father. They are still the only two involved and responsible of everything happening in the vineyard, in the cellar. So they still go every day in the vineyard and everything is happening in the cellar. They are in the first line. So they do the job. Of course, we do have employees. Of course, we do have co-workers, but they are always the same, especially the vineyards one. We have our team. We have people that are 23 years at working with us in the fields. This is because it's very important the way we behave in the vineyards because our philosophy is to make wines in the vineyard. Back then, Daddy was doing all its best, but being only one as a solo player, it was a little bit more hard. Plus, we have also more time to do a lot of research on how to do better these things, how we can act to have more sustainability way, how we can reach the best results co-working with. So we have more time and we can do more research. We have more information about how to conduct our vineyards and our soil, which is very, very important.
Fantastic. So tell me, how many bottlings does your winery make? What are the different styles? Because you not only make Barbaresco, but you make Dolcetto, Chardonnay. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. We consider ourselves Barbaresco winemakers because we do make like 75,000 bottles per year, more or less. And we do have on our property, so they are our own lands, 15 hectares. They're all in Barbaresco region, so between Barbaresco municipality and Neve municipality. And so everything we produce is come from our own. And the total is 75,000 and they are spread between Nebbiolo, which is our majority in grow and in production, Barbera, Dolcetto, and we do also make 3,000 bottles of Chardonnay. This is the only varietals that we grow, but 75,000 bottles are spread on 12 different labels. 9 of those labels are 100% Nebbiolo, and in this 9, 7 of those are 7 different Barbaresco. So we are a little bit crazy on Barbaresco wines.
But you're sourcing from how many vineyards that are owned by your family?
We do own a plot in Rabaia, in Currà,
See?
Marcorino, San Cristoforo, and Fausoni.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular favorite vineyard?
They are
And why?
all fantastic and in them characteristic. They are like our kids. You cannot pick between your kids. Like in the wines, I'm not able to pick only one wine.
And the elevation of these vineyards are no more than 550 meters, correct? But what's
Yeah,
the
no,
elevation of yours?
we are around 280 to 300, 320.
And they face south, east.
The majority is south southwest, and we have this beautiful vineyard in Marcorino, which is facing southeast. But also we have a little portion which is north. It's also a different position where we do make not the Barbaresco, but yes, we are a little bit, not all, but the majority is southwest, south, and southeast.
So one of the things that I found fascinating taking the bus tour and seeing the actual geography in front of me was, and maybe you can explain this and educate the audience, when you have the cold temperatures coming off the mountains from the north heading south and they meet up with the Ligurian warm temperatures, how does that play into the vineyard and ultimately into making your wines when you have these two diverse temperature types?
Well, this is it's absolutely like a must. So because the subsoil, it's very, very important. It's absolutely the important things because the roots get the nutrition from the soil, but also the microclimate. So what is up the soil, which is absolutely also very important, and so all of these micro changement on micro circulation of the air flows, and so on, they are very important. So the Alps. And also in Barbaresco, we are also blessed compared to the side of Barolo that we have also the Tanaro River, which makes a big difference as well. Like in the Roero, everything it has a micro diversity that it will be translated in a certain way in the characteristic of the product at the end.
You're very selective with the wood when aging your wines. Can you explain to us the aging, extensive stave aging exterior, right? Over 40 months, is that correct? In the open?
The age of the wine is mostly in big barrels, 18, 20 hectoliters. There it's French oak. And for the Barbaresco, so our entry level Barbaresco, it's like 10, 12 months. While for the single vineyards, it's 14 months more or less. And the Riserva, 18 months.
Are you using just the botti or are you using barrique also?
Barrique are used for Nebbiolo and for Barbera. But also the barrique that we use, they are very used. They are not all new oak. We prefer to try to keep the woods as healthy as possible and to use for many years instead of changing every year. To translate all of this in our philosophy, we always say that for us the wood is a device, is not an ingredient.
And then is it true that the staves are dried out in the open for over 40 months? That's a long period of time.
No, we don't leave the woods to dry too much. So when they are not used, we try to clean and to keep it as healthy as possible, but then we fill up again. We don't leave the woods empty for a long time.
And Rabaja, why is that so special compared to the other vineyard sites? What would you say? How can you explain that?
So actually, I'm not sure about. I cannot tell why it's so special, but it's always giving very special grapes. It's magic. I think it's due to the position of the Rabaya. For I don't know if somebody went to the winery or visited the winery. We have this beautiful balcony which is facing on the Rabaya vineyard, and from the balcony you can really see what makes so special because the shape of Rabaya, it's Rabaya with Asili in the lowest part of the Martinenga. So all of these three single vineyard, the shape of the hill, it's like an amphitheater. And not so far, it's the Tanaro River. It's where the Tanaro River is passing. And between the Rabaya and the front hills, there is like a little canyon. So the airflows from the Tanara River can get through that canyon and then arrives in the Rabaya, which is this shape of amphitheater. So there is like a microcirculation of the air, which keep the environment to be absolutely good. It's always super healthy, fresh, dry. I mean, it's perfect in terms of balancing the ecosystem. If also not a good season happens at the Rabaya, it's always the vineyards that it gets less illness. So it's always the most healthy one. And I think it's due to this fact of micro circulation of the airflows that comes from the Tano River. Also, Kura, it's like Rabaya in terms of this canyon which arrives on the vineyard from the Tanaro, but the shape of the Kura, it's a little bit more short. And so the airflows that arrives are a little bit more intense. And due to the shape, it's a little bit more warm, the environment. Super healthy as well, but a different condition, even though the airflows arrive as the Rabaya. So it's really hard to tell. There are thousand things that makes one vineyards to be different than the other. If we move, we go to Marcorino, for example. Marcorino is southeast, and on the top of the Marcorino, there is a lines of maritime pines in the Langhe. And then you wonder why maritime pines can grow so well in the Langhe region. So, which means that there is like an ecosystem which allows to have like a different microdiversity. And so we have a different ambience. And this is the magic of the Langhe. I'm talking about these three vineyards because I know very well, because I walk there pretty often, but there are thousands of explanations like this, there are thousands of examples like this in the region.
And these vineyards are just a few hectares, right? Like, what's the size of Rabaya and Marcorino? Less than 4 or 5 hectares?
Rabaya, it's 3.8, our property, because the crew, the MGA, it's bigger, of course. So, we own 3.8. In Marcorino, it's a little bit more than half, like 0.8, something like that. And in Cura, it's our biggest. In Cura, we have 8.5 hectare. So it's also where we are trying to create. My brother has this amazing project of trying to give back to the nature what we are taking. So try to compensate what we are doing in the soil. And so he's trying to build a natural ecosystem. So we have a little pond, and he clean up the pond water and planting trees and special herbs around the pond to attract the wild duck, the frogs, and all these wild animals like mosquitoes and whatever. And then also we planted some fruits trees so that the wild birds can take some nutrition from the apples, the pear, and whatever falls on the ground. And also some taller trees to try to attract as much wild animal or wild insect as possible, trying to make the ecosystem to be stronger and to try to pay back the nature with gratitude on what we get, because we are working in the vineyard. So we are working with the nature. So we don't want just to take, but also to give a little bit.
Is your winery officially organic certified? Or because
No,
I
we.
also heard that many wineries are practicing but not officially certified. So maybe you could talk to us about that.
Yes, so we are doing the same. We are doing practicing all as organic and trying to be as much eco-sustainable as possible, doing all our job with the total respect of the ambient we are working. We don't have a certification because it's too much paperwork to fill up. And my brother says that he prefers to be busy in the vineyards, taking care of the lands instead of being behind the desk and filling up Excel with the numbers and things. If it's just a matter of certification, so the stamp, we prefer to bring our customer in our lands and to show exactly what's going on. This is the best certification we can get.
I couldn't agree more, but I appreciate the effort respecting the land.
Yes,
So
it's nothing against the certification or the people that ask the certification because, total respect for the ones who are certified and absolutely is not against a system. It's just like we prefer to be farmer instead of paper fillers.
completely agree. Perhaps you could take a few minutes and educate us on the MGA system because perhaps not everyone is aware of what that is and why that's so important, and then also how that may refer to or apply to labeling on a bottle.
Yes, the MGA, it's this amazing project that was done by Alessandro Masnaghetti. And I remember the first time when he started to bring the project into map, it was, I guess, I remember about 1994. So he's working on this thing since a very long time. And basically, he mapped what the territory was called as Borgata. Everybody was calling that plot like with that name, or it was related to the house or to the name of the suburb, if we can call like this, because Barbaresco, remember, is a countryside. Today it's 609 people, inhabitants, when they're all home. So it's very, very small. And so Alessandro Masnaghetti made this amazing project, putting on a map and making borders and officializing what we were using already as a crew, as a vineyards. And the name MGA, it's Menzione Geografica Aggiuntiva. So menzione is the geographic name which is added on your product. And so it's very important. It's because if we think about in the beverage industry, that gives you exactly and so precisely the provenience of the fruits that are used to make that specific glass of wine, that specific bottle of wine. So if you see Rabaya written on the label of a wine, it means that the grapes are coming from the Rabaya plot. So basically, tomorrow you can take a plane, a train, a car, a walk, come to Barbaresco, and you walk in the Rabaya and you can see with your eyes the condition of the soil or the terroir and of the vineyard. So this is such a precision of the origin of the fruits that are used to make that specific bottle. And I think it's amazing. I think it's like one of the strongest things we have, and it's absolutely deserved for the territory that we are representing, because Langhe region, Langhe Roero, this region, it's really a blessed region in terms of agriculture. If we think about the great product we can grow here, there are at least five others that are famous all over the world as to be great product. And this is not because we are magician or because we are like the genius of marketing. It's really because of the soil and the terroir and all the ecosystem that makes this area to be pretty blessed and allowed us to grow excellent things in terms of the agriculture side.
So one of the things I really enjoyed about my recent visit to Langhe was the Langhe Nebbiolo, and you make the fralu. And I was wondering, as educators and salespeople, sometimes it's hard to educate or turn someone on, get excited about wines of Barolo, Barbaresco level that are expensive, right? And so I was thinking, the Langhe Nebbiolo is a great introduction to someone who doesn't know about Nebbiolo, right? And so maybe you can also give us some tips on how to educate consumers using maybe the Langhe Nebbiolo, because I saw a lot of Langhe Nebbiolo at the Grande Langhe. Very impressive.
Yes, Langhe Nebbiolo, compared to Barolo and Barbaresco, it has a little bit more freedom on the rules of production. But it is the very important step to introduce, as you said, to introduce the people to know how to appreciate wines like Barolo and Barbaresco, that sometimes could be quite intense or strong for some people in terms of tannins and complexity. So Langhe is the perfect start. So this is exactly our philosophy on our fralu, our Langhe Nebbiolo fralu, which is made with basically the younger vines. So the vineyard, which are between 4 up to 8 years old as the vines. They are harvested a little bit in advance, so to get a little bit more higher pH. So this helps to have more freshness during the fermentation. And it's fermented in a little bit shorter time, like 16, 18 days of maturation. And then just a couple of few months, like 10 months in barrique used. Our Langhe Nebbiolo Fralù, it really wants, I call it the Barbaresco in a short pants. So it wants to be like the easy going, like the casual version of these incredible varietals that is Nebbiolo, which can be also vinified, getting the complexity and tannins and the structure of a super important wines. So the Langhe, we use it to let people start drinking the Nebbiolo varietals. Yeah.
I agree. I saw many that were made in a very fresh, ripe, and
Exactly.
approachable style, which is great. It's a great
Yeah.
introduction to someone who's not familiar with these wines.
Yeah.
And so tell me, you make a little rosato, is that correct? Langhe rosato?
Exactly. This is a new project from
Can
my
you tell us about
brother.
this?
Yes, the Langhe Rosato, it's made with 100% Nebbiolo grapes and is really the first step of the Nebbiolo because it's the very early harvest, end of August. We pick the grape for the Rosato and it's vinified with the full grapes, so full bunch, 1 day of maturation to get just a little bit of color and then it's prepared for the bottle. So it wants to be like a summer Nebbiolo wines. So because sometimes people say, no, Nebbiolo, it's too heavy. Just in the winter, it's too hot for Nebbiolo. So we want to give also the opportunity to have Nebbiolo in the summertime. So absolutely doesn't want to be like a pool party rosé because it's representing Nebbiolo varietals. So it's very important varietals. So it's very gastronomic. So it's the perfect bottle for the table, very easy pairing with the food. Actually, it's easier to pair our Langhe Rosato with a white meat instead of a raw fish because of the complexity, the saltiness, the sapidity that Nebbiolo can express, the lavender notes, the pink grapefruits. And then at the sip, it always in its back the tannins, which are caressing and stays and remains on the sip, giving that little kind of complexity. And so it's a very, very interesting project that was very successful for Rosato from Langhe, because normally the Rosato varieties is used for bubble. So we are presenting in a still version.
Well, I'm happy that you are because I've had a few others and I've really enjoyed the Nebbiolo style. So is this a new project? What's the first vintage? And do you have this available for export? Do we have any in the US?
Yes, it's the first vintage was 2022. It's out the 2023 at the moment, and it will be soon arriving the 2024. And see, it's available for the export. See.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So that gets me to the next question, which is what's your favorite wine and food pairing? And what other recommendations would you have for the audience? Perhaps white truffles, black truffles?
Oh, that's a very serious question because I'm a wine
That's why
lover.
I asked.
So
Oh, mamma
I'm
mia.
a wine lover, and for me, it's very hard to pick only one. I think that there is an occasion for every wine, and that's why I'm a wine lover. Because it's not only time for only one type of wine, but there are multiple time for multiple type of wine. So it depends on what you're doing. So my favorite wine for pizza, for example, it's dolcetto. For barbaresco, that could be I don't know, depend maybe risotto mushrooms or the white truffle, absolutely tajarin with white truffles. It really depends also on your mood. It's not always a mood of tajarin with white truffles, neither the mood for pizza. So it really depends. What my grandmother always told us, it's you have to do what you like. So there is a good pairing, of course, but it's mostly okay. If you want to drink dolcetto with white truffle, why not? If you like
Right?
it and if you
You like
feel
it?
that you want to have a dolcetto with white truffle, you have to do it. Or if you want to have oysters with barbaresco, go for it. If you feel that it's your pairing, do it.
Well, I had that fresh pasta tagliatelle 3 out of the 5 days I was there last week, so I'm a
Yeah.
fan. And my final question is Can you please tell us about your favorite or the funniest story you've ever had in your time at the winery making wine?
Yes, there are 1,000, but the ones I picked for you tonight is the one that can explain the history of our family. So, which is that is the history of my first drunk. So my parents drank me when I was 10 days old, not on purpose, of course, but because it's a family estate. So I born at the end of July, and in July it's where we do normally bottle the Barbaresco wines. And so my mom was just home from the hospital with me, very baby in a stroller, and she has to help on doing the bottling procedure. And so she bring me with a stroller in the cellar. But back then, the bottling machine was not the super technologic that we have today. It was pretty open. And so there was all the alcohol that was coming out from the machine in the air. And so the room was full of the alcoholicity. And so I breathed all day that here, and I was completely drunk. And so I can tell that I was drunk at 10 days. My mom was immediately so scared because I couldn't wake up. She thought I was passed out. And so she called the doctor to come over immediately because I couldn't wake up for the feed with the milk. And I was still sleeping for all the afternoon, and I was just 10 days old, so it was absolutely not normal. And so when the doctor arrived, he looked at the room, he looked at my mom, and he said, she's drunk. Just bring her in the house, let her rest. When she's gonna get up, she will be in hangover for maybe one day, but then she will be fine. It's just a drunk.
That's a great story. That's a great
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
Well, thank you for your time today. I really enjoyed listening to you, learning more about your family's history in winemaking and the wines, you beautiful wines you make. I can't wait to have you here in Florida doing the tasting on March 4th at our restaurant, the Grove Cucina Wine in Stuart, Florida. Luisa, would you like to share your social media information and tags? So if anyone wants to follow you and source your wines, I know you obviously sell them here in Florida, but where else do you have distribution and how can we find you?
Yes. So, and first of all, thank you for inviting me today. It was a pleasure for me to speak about our history and our family. And thank you for inviting me to this chat. I can't wait to be back to Florida soon. So, if somebody is around the north of Florida in March, come and visit me and Louise at the Grove. And you can find me on social media and as Instagram, Luisa_Rocca, or the website of the winery, which is brunorocca.it. We are not super social, but we try to do our best.
When in Langhe, visit Luisa and her family. I'm sure they will be as hospitable as they have to me with opening their doors and cellars and tasting fantastic wines. And I wish you safe. Buon viaggio a casa mia.
Yeah, grazie.
Prego.
I think this is a wrap then. Thank you, everybody. I'm closing the room now. So, yeah, have a great one, everyone.
Thank you.
Ciao, ciao.
Have a good day. Ciao, ciao.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.